Welcome back to Can Do, your bi-weekly source of art making inspiration from the Cincinnati Art Museum. My name's Alex and I work in the Rosenthal Education Center, and I have some art projects I would like to share with you using materials you can find around your house. So today we are going to make our very own custom stamp. So to make your own custom stamp, the number one thing you need is a source of styrofoam. Since styrofoam is bad for the environment, cannot be recycled, we're not going to buy any styrofoam. We're going to use some styrofoam that we might otherwise be throwing away. So that would include meat and veggie trays from the supermarket, washed and dried. And it would also include, if you get takeout, your takeout containers that are made out of styrofoam. So what I've done is I've taken a little square takeout container from my favorite Thai place, and I've cut 2 squares out of my styrofoam, which is what we're going to use for our stamps. So the other materials you're going to need for this project are, you're going to need a pencil, you're going to need some washable markers, you're going to need some paper, a couple sheets of paper, some scissors, a little bowl of water, got some water right here, and you're going to need a clean sponge. So our first step for this project is cutting down our styrofoam into the size and shape of the stamp that you'd like. So like I said, I cut out, you want to cut out a flat piece of styrofoam, so you can't use any of the curved edges. You just want to take and cut into it and get a nice flat piece of styrofoam. I've made my stamps about 4 inches by 4 inches. So once you do that, you want to decide what your design is going to be for your stamp. So simple designs work best, and I definitely recommend that you take a piece of scrap paper and maybe sketch out some different ideas and decide, what you're going to carve into your stamp, because once you actually start carving into that styrofoam, there's no erasing. You kind of just have to go with what you decide to do. So what I decided to do is, can you read this? It says, I heart you. So I decided to carve I, a heart, and then the letter U. So to do that, you'll just take your pencil, you'll have your sketch for reference, and you just kind of lightly carve into the surface of your styrofoam. You don't want to press too hard, because you don't want to poke a hole in the styrofoam. You just want to make an indentation. So wherever you're making your lines and your indentations, that is where the ink will not go. So I did an I, and then did a heart, and then the letter U. So if you can see, this is what the finished stamp looks like. And that's your stamp. You've made a stamp. So when artists who make prints like this, a lot of times they use special printmaking ink, and they use a special tool called a brayer, and that's a little roller that kind of evenly and uniformly puts paint on their printing plate. Now, since most of us don't have that at home, I thought what we could use are washable markers. So I'm going to show you an alternative way of printing using washable markers, water, and a sponge. So we're going to take our paper. My dog Darlin just came over to say hi. We're going to take our paper. We're going to take our print plate. We're going to take a marker. I think actually I'm going to use magenta. So our very first step is we'll take our marker and we're going to uniformly color in our print plate. So I started in top left corner and I'm moving down the print plate, coloring in every part of the surface, just really neatly. So hold on, I'll show you in just a minute. Okay, So So I filled it all in. And one thing you'll notice when you're coloring onto your stamp, that the color is not very bright on the Styrofoam stamp, but that's okay. The color is actually going to be a lot brighter once you put it onto the page. So I've covered my stamp. I'm going to set that down, and I'm going to take my sponge and I'm going to just get it just a little bit damp. I already did that once, so my sponge is pretty much ready to go. You don't want it dripping wet because we're just going to lightly coat the portion of our paper where we're going to print with water, just super lightly coat. So you can see I'm holding down my paper, I'm taking my sponge, and I'm just dragging it down on the side of the paper where I'm going to do my print. Just no water droplets, just the tiniest bit wet. Okay, so I went down and then across. Set my sponge down. Now I'm going to carefully pick up my stamp and decide where it's going to go. And once you set it down, you can't move it again. You can't reposition it. So you want to make sure you just very carefully set it down on your paper, and then hold it down and press really hard all four corners. Make sure you're still holding it so it isn't slipping and sliding around. And so we're transferring all that ink onto the paper. Okay, great, I think I got it. And now carefully lift up your print plate, and voila, you have your stamp. Now I'm gonna do that one more time because I'm gonna be turning this artwork into some cards, which is a great way that you can use your custom stamp, is to make some cards and send a card to maybe your best friend, or you can maybe send a card to your grandparents or your aunt and uncle. Just tell them that you're thinking about them and you love them. That's my plan. At least that's what I'm going to use my stamp for. Let's see. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, now I'm gonna dampen my paper one more time. Hi, darling. Okay. Gonna take my stamp, set it down. Same as before, just making sure all that ink gets transferred. Okay. Lift it up. Ooh, that one turned out great. See? Got two stamps. So now to turn these into cards, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to fold my paper in half. And then I'll take my little scissors and just carefully cut it in half. And voila, I have two cards. Now, after you make your cards, because you did get the paper a little bit damp, if you want to keep the paper from rolling up, you can put maybe a stack of books on top of your cards for an hour or so, and then they'll be nice and flat. Because as you can see, the paper does kind of curl up a little bit since you got it a little bit wet. So I've got my two beautiful cards. And speaking of books, if you'd like to pair today's art making with a book, I recommend Uncle Andy's Cats by James Warhola. This book is about a very famous artist named Andy Warhol who used printing in his artwork. And the book is written by his nephew, who talks about some of his memories of his Uncle Andy Warhol. Thanks again for joining me, and as always, please put your pictures of your artwork in the comments so I can see it, and I will see you next Friday for another art making video. Bye!